So in this video, I want to address the question, are people with untreated borderline personality disorder, are they evil? Are they bad people? My answer to that question is categorically no, they're not. Borderlines are not psychopaths. They're not um, narcissists in the official psychological definition. They have other kinds of things going on. Um, they're not evil, meaning they don't want to cause you harm. In fact, they probably want to be a loving, helpful person in your life and in the world in general. You know, the girl that I was with, I definitely know for a fact that she has deep compassion for people, and she has worked very hard to be the kindest person she can be. Unfortunately, that in and of itself does not get rid of the underlying causes of her borderline issue. So, borderlines are not evil. They're not bad people. They're not lazy. They're not unkind. They are, the best way that I can describe it is that they are not completely formed on a psychological level. There are big chunks in their personality that is missing. That's not their fault. It means that they suffered tremendously as infants. So this is one of the hardest things about borderline personality disorder, is that the borderline is going to have a very difficult time recognizing what they're doing and why they're doing it. And because on an emotional level they are still arrested at age, could be anywhere from, you know, months to 2 or 3 years. You know, they're emotionally arrested at that level, which means they experience the world with the intensity that an infant or a toddler does. So remember, I mean, you know, I can't remember being an infant. I can't remember being anything younger than 4 years of age. So, you know, you can imagine if we can't remember going that far back, neither can they. But that's where their emotional development stopped in terms of their identity of who they are. So they are still at that place where they feel everything very intensely. And that's why when they react very intensely, and they have no idea what they're doing or why they're doing it. It's really important to understand that if you're in a relationship with somebody who is a borderline or who you think may be borderline, then you need to understand that the times when they seem to be functioning, and that you take you know, the information that you're seeing from them as though they are fully formed adults, that is a very deceptive experience. And this is why it's such a deceptive disease to deal with, because we can't see underneath the surface what is really going on. And what's really going on is underneath the surface, there is a huge black hole of insecurity, of terror, of anxiety. And just like an infant, imagine an infant who's neglected just for a few hours. That infant that's crying in their crib and nobody's coming to take care of them. Imagine that feeling in the body and the mind of an adult. That's what you're dealing with. So they do not have the ability to handle complex relationship interactions. This is why when they're happy, they're happy. When they love you, they love you. And in that moment, they can have deep emotional conversations. They can talk about the future because they have a fully formed human, adult brain and intellect. But underneath it is the emotional development of an infant. Infants don't have the ability to think into the future or go into the past. This is one of the things that was most confusing for me because, I was constantly trying to figure out, this dance of how do I relate to her without pushing her buttons or pissing her off or, oh, look, she's happy now. And, taking her at face value when she would say, yeah, I realize what I did wasn't right. Going forward, here's what I'm going to do to make sure that that doesn't happen again. I'm logging that in as though she has the ability to actually follow through. She didn't. And that's why they can say one day, for instance, in my case, she knew that she had something that needed to be dealt with. She knew she had childhood trauma that she needed to deal with. She had sexual trauma that needed to be dealt with. So she was open to the idea of getting some help. Of course, I haven't seen her do that yet. So then we would talk, and I remember, numerous times saying, you should look into borderline because there are some symptoms that you have. And she's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You're probably right. I look forward to that. Now I'm thinking that understanding is going to go into the future, but that's only in the moment. She would forget that she even said that. She would even forget that she had asked me, called me on the phone, will you find a therapist for us? Next day, we'll be talking, and then I'll say something along the lines of, she was struggling with should she listen to her intuition, and I said something offhand like, well, sometimes borderlines have magical thinking, and so it's hard to be accurate with your own intuition about yourself. Well, that turned into I was attacking her self-esteem. I was telling her that she was crazy and that I was insidiously planning to destroy her self-esteem and make her crazy. And then she couldn't have anything to do with me. This is a borderline. And so if you think that you're going to have any rational discussion about anything going forward, it's not going to last, because just like an infant, whatever is happening in the moment is only for the moment. The moment they get stimulated, and for them, remember, they're an infant that was abandoned emotionally, neglected physically. So that's their greatest fear, is to be abandoned and neglected, and that has turned into rejection and criticism. And so anything in that moment, if they're feeling the slightest bit uncomfortable, what was okay the day before, which they had no problem hearing and listening to, if they're triggered, which has nothing to do with you, anything you say or do, including a look on your face, will stimulate them, and the next thing you know, it's the worst possible thing that's ever been said to anybody in the history of human beings, and that you're the worst person in the world. They have no awareness that they are not following through with anything that they've said. They have no awareness that they have no consistency in their thoughts, their feelings, their interactions with you. That's because, again, it's like, imagine going and grabbing an infant, even a 2-year-old, and sitting them down and explaining to them, now remember yesterday we talked about you mowing the lawn. And you said, yes, Daddy, I'm going to mow the lawn. And you played with your little lawnmower. Remember how fun that was? You promised me you were going to mow the lawn today. You're not mowing the lawn. That little 2-year-old is going to start crying and having a temper tantrum because he doesn't know what the hell you're talking about. That's what it's like for them. So they're not evil. From our perspective, it feels that way. Because if somebody were conscious and sane, and if they were to flip like that and completely change, break all their promises, and then take things that you've said out of context and make you into a horrible person, that would be the sign of somebody who was really sadistic and trying to harm you. They're not trying to do that. We call this a mental illness, but it's not because that they're evil or warped. It's just that they're not fully formed and they're operating from the level of an infant or a toddler. So the answer to the question is, are borderlines evil? No. Having said that, that awareness doesn't change the fact that if they are untreated, they will cause you tremendous harm. And the harm, this is really important, the harm will be just as horrible as if they were evil. They do not have fully formed empathic abilities. They cannot empathize with your feelings. They are sociopathic. And when they attack, when they break their promises, when they act irrationally and harm you, it will have the same hurt and trauma and impact on you as if they had planned it. And here's the thing, you won't be able to defend yourself. If you are emotionally attached to them, you can intellectually know that they have a disease, but on an emotional level, you won't be able to not feel the pain as if they had planned to harm you, because their behavior is not rational, it's not normal, it is extremely destructive, it's incredibly narcissistic, and it is very selfish. The difference is they can't help it. So if you go to a normal person, non-BPD who comes at you and does those kinds of things, then you can say, do you have any idea what you did? That was the cruelest thing anybody's ever done. You were so selfish. And they can say, you're right. I was very selfish in that moment. I won't do it again. The borderline can even say that, but it won't hold, because if they don't have treatment, they won't have the tools to be able to, number one, go forward into the future with that feeling, nor will they be able to handle their feelings when they get triggered. If they're not triggered, they might be able to imagine themselves doing something differently. But, again, they feel things so intensely, and their emotional development is so stunted, so arrested at such an early age, that once they're triggered, nothing they've said in the past and nothing you can say to them in that moment will change anything unless they get treatment. So they're not evil. If you want to call them mentally ill, you can, but even that has a stigma to it. The real scenario is that they are handicapped on a deeply psychological level, and they're not fully formed. So they're just simply not capable of honoring your feelings, of seeing you, and having any kind of normal, mature empathy. They just don't have the ability. And when they harm you, even if they apologize afterwards, they still don't understand what they've done. They know that you feel they've done something wrong, and they know intellectually that it's wrong, but on an emotional level, just like an infant, they have no concept, no real awareness. So they don't have any empathy. You have to treat them as sociopaths. They're not going to be able to protect you or take care of you. If you're in a relationship with a borderline that's untreated and does not want treatment, get out. It's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. When they're in a good place, you're going to be soothed into thinking that everything's going to be okay. And then once you become vulnerable, your vulnerability, by the way, your vulnerability will trigger them. This is something that I learned the hard way. They'll love it in the moment. When you're vulnerable emotionally with them in the moment, they will love it, because they crave emotional intimacy. But that very emotional intimacy will take them directly to the core of themselves, which is pure fear, terror, anxiety, paranoia, and that's what's going to trigger it. So really, there's nothing you can do. There's no way you can have any kind of relationship with them if they're untreated and they're a full-on borderline. It won't happen.